Yeah, nice. Who were the ones that had the most influence on you there?
Well, you know, we were talking a moment ago about attendance, and I did attend classes, but I also attended Joe Diorio's room
counseling
quite a
thing.
bit.
Yeah,
I was what they call a Diorio puppy.
Ah, yes.
And I was in there whenever you know, if he could stand me being there, I was in there, because I felt like that was just priceless.
Yeah.
And same with Ron Eschte. Ron Eschte was also another guy who really influenced me. We played a lot together. We did some gigs together. He called me for a few things to sub for him. So, and I had a 7-string guitar at the time, and so Ronnie was right on the cutting edge of that. I've since given up the 7th string, but so Ronnie was huge. So Ronnie and Joe were my among the master teachers. But also Bruce Buckingham was really helpful. I loved Chaz. He was my private teacher, and he played like a Chet Atkins style, and so we connected on the fingerstyle side of things. You know what, I really feel like there was something going on there where there was so much energy there, and there was so much outside of the classroom that was of value. And for me, a lot of the classes that were being offered, at least in the first 2 quarters, would have been review if I had done them. So when I felt like I, you know, had it, I'd go out and see if I could find Scott Henderson and jam with him or something like that.
Right.
And so I guess I probably kind of created my own idea about what I was going to get from the school, and certainly benefited greatly from it. And made contacts that I still keep today.
You know, that's quite often, I hear that you mentioned Scotty Henderson. He was a great player coming into school. He spent most of his time teaching rather than going to class, because he was that.
Down, right?
So there was that aspect of the environment there where you could be an advanced player, and or you could be not a beginner, because it wasn't made for beginners. But in fact, I was talking to Don Mock, was saying yesterday that he'd be in a classroom and there'd be a player that hadn't been playing long, and somebody like yourself, very advanced, says, who do I teach here?
Yeah.
But it seemed to all work out, because the way they would approach things is, the language is still a universal language anyhow. So you're playing a lot now?
I teach 3 days a week. I have my own studio in another part of town, and I gig a lot. Yeah, you know, and it's a good, Seattle's a good sized town for a guy who wants to play often and not have to travel. Of course, I travel between, you know, I said earlier, kind of a 300-mile radius in every direction except west, because you can't go 300 miles west. But yeah, it's a lot of driving, a lot of gigging in the general area. I'm fortunate to play with a couple of really musical situations. I play with Lee Oscar, who's a harmonica player who was in the band War and has a famous line of harmonicas, and that's kind of a jazz-inspired jam band. And I play a lot of duets with singers. That's one of my specialties, solo guitar gigs. I'm pretty busy on the blues scene. Playing,
I could hear that when you just played for me. Scary, scary.
And so yeah, I'll do a fair amount of electric blues. I play with a guy named Mark Dufresne, and he was the singer of Roomful of Blues for 6 years on the road with them, and now he's here again and put a band together, including myself and a couple other guys.
So you get to be doing this forever, right?
You know, my story has a little bit of a break from music in it. I took a fairly long period of time off. So now that I'm back to it, yeah, I think I want to, maybe I'll peak when I'm about 85 or so. And finally figure it out.
I don't think you'll ever lose that. It's there soon.
Yeah. As long as my hands hold up, you know, that's about it. It's like the tools gotta stay strong.
There you go. You know, that's an interesting thought about money. So many of the students came. Jennifer Batten, you remember Jennifer?
Yeah.
Jennifer said that she lived in somebody's garage and the roof leaked and the carpet got soaked and it smelled to high heavens for months, but she loved what she was doing and wanted it so bad she didn't care. She ate top ramen every day for, that was the, and I was surprised to see.
Good preparation for being in a band on the road.
Oh, you bet, you betcha. So, how did you do? Was it expensive for you to live, and did you survive?
Well, I had the benefit of, unlike a lot of guys who were coming to LA for the purpose of going to school and then heading back home. I had moved to Hollywood. I was married at the time. My wife had a family in the neighborhood, and she had a job. So I was able to take that year. I didn't have to take any gigs, although I probably would have benefited from that as well. But I really took the year to study and to dig in. And I got a small Pell Grant.
Oh, you did, okay.
And I think we borrowed a little money, and so it worked out okay. It didn't really set us back too.
You didn't ever come in my office needing an advance for your next month's rent?
No.
Because
I've
had this real quick one. Carmi Tedesco, Tommy's wife, was the bookkeeper at that time, and for a poor student, helpless student, he's out of money, and he wants $50 to make it through the end of to pay his rent.
Right.
And I'd hear down the hall, absolutely not, from Carmi. So they come out
with a soft touch.
They come down to my office and say, hey Pat, listen, can you help me out here, buddy? Were there difficult times for you there? Do you recall?
I would say that unlike some of the guys who have the stories of not having enough money or getting beat up on the street or any of those other kinds of horror stories that you might have, the living situation and day-to-day thing wasn't difficult for me because I had some family support and whatnot. Of course, the area I believe that I probably didn't really digest it in my experience from GIT till years later, but I can source back the beginnings of it to then, is having my butt kicked by Carl Schroeder, or and at the time my reaction was to run from that, and to, as musicians, we're somewhat delicate, and ego wise, in my little town I was something else, and then I come down there and Carl doesn't care if I can play Charlie Parker licks. He wants to teach me how to play the arpeggios in good time all the way through and not play all this flowery crap, so artistically, I guess you could say, I bumped into some difficulty because I had a fully formed ego at the time, as we all did, and I really had, that was my challenge, is to be open enough to learn.
Yeah.
And to be open enough to learn from all sources, not just the Joe Diorios and the Ron Eshtes. And I think that, I could see how that journey of a musician with an ego who isn't always, like for instance, when you're a sideman, you don't get to have an ego, or it's private.
That's right.
Right? I mean, you put it out there for the benefit of your employer and to make the front person look good. And I didn't learn that lesson as early as I would have hoped I could have learned it. I certainly have learned it now, I think.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Because I do that a lot, and I think I'm successful at it.
Yeah.
But that was a hard one, so for me, the guys who helped me with that most were guys like Eric Pascal and Charlie Fector, because Charlie and Eric were the guys who I didn't know about until I got there, but they were leading the lifemanship classes, and so Charlie, you know, taught me about meditation, which has become a big part of my life, and Eric was just a sweet soul that, you know, could listen well and give you the straight story in a gentle way. And so I started learning about this business of how does my ego and who I see myself as a musician rub up against sometimes, you know, in an uncomfortable way to the situation that I found myself in.
So Tim, fascinating. You're talking about ego, and we know what that is in a way. We know it's the little guy on your shoulder telling you what to do, and sometimes you listen, sometimes you don't. But ego, it does play a huge role, and yet musicians seem to have the ability to suppress the ego. But how did you discover ego as something you needed to deal with?
I'll try. I could probably talk for hours on this subject, so I'll try and keep it very brief. Well, I noticed that in certain situations, the music was suffering because of my attitude toward it, or my attitude toward myself, or my attitude toward others in the group. You know, wanting to stick out when you. I mean, having a desire in your guts to want to stick out in the world, and then fighting with the fact that when you play music, you are fitting in and disappearing into a group. So you know, and things. I mean, rudimentary things like being able to play in the pocket. Well, when you play in the pocket, you kind of disappear. And if your ego is telling you you want to appear, then playing in the pocket is there's cognitive dissonance there. So those kinds of things would come up. But then also you'd have, personally would have an experience of playing, you know, improvised music with good players, and all of a sudden everything disappears. And you have this falling away of your ideas about what you want to do, and all of a sudden it's just a kind of music playing itself experience. And you get to have that experience as well. And for me that occurred a couple of times, and I was curious, and I connected the dots between some of the things Joe DiOrio and I were talking about, some things on the spiritual side of the coin, the development of our inner world, the person who is then responsible for bringing the music out. You know, it's not the scales and the chords and the arpeggios anymore. It's who are you? What do you have to say? How are you going to organize these musical concepts into something that is beautiful for the listener?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Well,
and so we go in for that. And when we go in whatever way we go, we discover where we get stuck and what our hindrances are. I personally got interested, again, I think Charlie Fector might be the guy. I have to meet Charlie again someday and thank him for many things. But I got into Buddhist meditation and spent many years, to continue to this day, and even took a quite substantial break from music playing because I had really become, you know, less than healthy in terms of the lifestyle and all, and felt a little unbalanced. And so I let music rest for a while and really dove into meditation as a life path.
Absolutely, absolutely. Okay.
So as those things unfold, you begin to connect the dots, and so you become a more whole person. You become a more whole musician.
But what would you say would be the most delightful time? What got you the most inspired and passionate and motivated?
Well, there were a number of events. Like I said, being a guy who was I didn't have any hesitancy to ditch a class if there was something more juicy going on somewhere else. And I don't know if that's good advice or not.
That's good advice, sure.
But I remember probably the most sort of walking a foot off the ground moment for me is I would often hang out with Joe DiOrio in his room, and Joe and I are still in touch. I still talk to him on the phone
Do you?
very frequently.
Wonderful.
he's like my musical father in some ways. He was so kind to me, very kind to me, and that in and of itself was powerful in ways that I again digested as I went on years later to realize that there's somebody on the earth that was willing to be present with you. So Joe, anything with Joe was great, but there was a day when Lenny Breau showed up at the school, and I'm a huge Lenny Breau fan. In fact, a lot of what how I play now is inspired by Lenny and Ted Green and Joe Diorio. Kind of, you say those three are my three.
That's a pretty good combination right there.
Well, we'll see. But one day Lenny came, and I had known Lenny. I'd gotten his number. I went down to Dante's, I think, and heard him play. Him and John Patitucci were playing, which was funny because John was just young on the scene. And Lenny gave me his telephone number. I think I had spoken to him on the phone prior to that. So I went and had a lesson with him at somebody's house. He was staying in town. He came to visit the school, and so we had known each other. And Joe and Lenny were really had a real neat thing going on, you know? And so I used to go to lunch a lot with Joe at a restaurant up the street a couple of blocks. And one day I stopped by Joe's office. Lenny was in the school, and Lenny and Joe were chatting, and they said, "Hey, Tim, you want to go for lunch?" You know? So here I am walking out of the school and down Hollywood Boulevard with Joe and Lenny on either side. Now, I'm 6 feet tall, and Joe and Lenny were about 5'4" each, you know, maybe, it seemed like that. And I just felt like such a goofy, lanky dork, walking down the street with two of my idols. I just could not even believe it. And I just sit down on the counter and eating our little tuna sandwiches or salads or whatever. Just I just couldn't believe what I was doing. You know?
That's great. I love it. What advice would you give, let's say, some young kid walking up those stairs, kind of in eyes big as saucers, and like, what's going to happen next? What advice would you give them as far as not only their experience in the school, but what they should be doing about themselves when they get there?
You know, I think that in a broad sense, I continue to teach. I carry a fairly good load of students 3 days a week, and have been a teacher even prior to going to GIT. I was a teacher, in a matter of speaking, and so one of the things as a teacher I have to do in the early stages of meeting with a new student is to find out what their learning style is. And one of the problems with institutions of learning is that they don't always allow for different learning styles because it needs to be, you know, a certain way. So just as a teacher needs to understand what a student's learning style is, particularly in private one-on-one lessons, so that you can help somebody on their journey in a way that's about them and not about your method or your technique or your ego. In the same way, each musician, this is a lifelong thing. It's not just before you go to school thing. But you have to find out how you learn. You have to discover for yourself how you absorb something, what works for you and what doesn't. So being in a room with lots of people and hearing clearly clear information dispensed to you and having a stack of paper and then an assignment, if that really works for you, then that's important to know because you will do well in an environment that produces that. If you are more of a daydreamer and you like to sort of swim and sort of soak things up in maybe a less linear way, then maybe it wouldn't be an environment that you could benefit from. But even inside of that environment, you have to honor your learning style. So I know guys that would go and sit in one of the computer labs with the headphones on, and they would just go jigga 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 jigga, and I just couldn't do that. So what I did was I would strap my old 175 on, and I would just walk the halls playing. You know, wandering around. I would just wander around and play, and stop and interact, and go in a quieter corner and noodle on something if I really needed to. So my style of learning wasn't A, B, C, D, E. You know, my style of learning was alphabet soup all over the place, and it's still. So that I think is the biggest thing: is you know, find out who you are, what you want, what you love, what's important to you, and find out how you learn best. And then when you're presented with the opportunity to learn, you can make the best of it.
Wow. So, okay, so here we are today in your teaching studio, full-time teaching program, and just playing and teaching is your career now, and it's wonderful to hear after all these years you were able to continue with it. And I'm imagining, listening to you play a little while ago and to hear you talk, that you've got some pretty good projects working in the works right now. Could you share what's going on now?
Yeah, sure. I do teach. When I first got back to Seattle in 2006, I started teaching at the musicians at RMI, Jay Roberts' place. And I walked in there one day and there was Don Mock, and he said, "I know you," and I said, "I know you," and so I ended up teaching it with Jay and Don over there. Through them, I met Roger Hutchinson from REH fame, and then Roger and I produced what was originally going to be a series of instructional lessons video that Don Mock was a director on, and we ended up putting out as a physical DVD rather than being a web-based thing. So just recently we released Blues Guitar Road Trip, yours truly. It's a 9-chapter sort of travelogue of regional blues styles throughout the country. Wow. So there's some New Orleans and Texas and Chicago styles, and it's in a familiar style. I'm sitting there with my guitar playing, and Don produced that and helped edit it, and so I was involved with him on that, and it just came out on Hal Leonard, so it's available. And then on a slightly smaller scale, but a scale that I really enjoy, Doug Perkins and a partner who also is a GIT guy, John Pinn, from Australia, put together a website called jazzguitarsociety.com, and they have master classes available. Many of the master teachers are former GIT people or current GIT people. I'm not sure how it all works out, but Dave Hill's got one, and David Becker's got a couple, and Doug's got a couple, and I've got one that's apparently doing pretty well called The Art of Two-Note Accompaniment, where I talk about the Lenny style, or Ed Pickard style. And I will be shooting in just a few days another one for them. And so that's ongoing, jazzguitarsociety.com.
Busy boy.
And I just found out yesterday that one of the things that I managed to do is I have a pretty good YouTube presence, and I do gear reviews, you know, different things like mostly stuff I use.
Wow.
And I got hooked up with Lawler pickups. Jason Lawler his shop is here on Vashon, so you can look right out across the water and you see that. He just asked me yesterday if I would make sound clips and video demos of all of his products, so that his website will be completely every one of his pickups will be demonstrated on video and a sound clip by myself, and that's a neat project. I really like their stuff, and I enjoy working with them, and I'm a gear nut, so I'm kind of a tone nut. So those are some things that I'm doing. I just opened my own studio, so I gave a sad farewell to Jay over there at the Roberts Music Institute, and figuring it was time for me to have my own operation. And in addition to my private teaching, I'm doing lots of gigs. And the wonderful thing about the computer age is I can teach on Skype, and I've been teaching people all over the world.
Wow.
So Skype lessons are available as well. Although the people in the far-flung areas want to learn about what I do.
Wow. You know, listening to what you just said, Tim, about all the different aspects, playing, of course, but no, you're doing videos, you're doing looking at evaluating equipment, and I was asked some time back when the school early days said, trying to kind of catch me off guard, so you're going to turn out all these big famous guitar players? And I said, no, if you notice the school's name, GIT, is an Institute of Technology. It's a vocational school, and Howard Roberts' original idea about the curriculum about the school was not necessarily to make a star out of somebody, because they're going to be a star whether or not the school has anything to do with it, but give them the facility, give them the ability to earn a living in music, in anywhere, whether it's writing music, whether it's playing in a studio or playing behind a singer, or like a Ron Eshday, all these different aspects were taught in the school either directly or indirectly because of the level of the instructors were from the streets, were from the studios that came in there and taught. So they were talking about the nuts and bolts of how to make a living, which was Howard's idea. He said, we're not going to make you a rock star, but we are going to make you a well-rounded, versatile musician who can earn a living, who will have clients all over the place. And this is your perfect example of this. So I just want to compliment you on that and say that.
I just feel very fortunate to be able to do that.
You betcha.
Well, thanks for asking.
So anyhow, I'd like to say thanks to Tim. Bless your heart. Beautiful, beautiful words coming from you about things I learned some great things right myself just listening to you. So anyhow, thank you, Tim. Thank you, world. Thank you, country. Thank you. God bless America, by the way. We'll see you next time.